Now, I'm not going to go too deep into exactly what SQL language is. For that, if you think that is something that, you guys want us to, create a video on, let us know in the comments. But otherwise, you can also, search it up on Google and just get a basic understanding, because a basic understanding of SQL is necessary even if you're using an ORM. So, again, if you want us to create a video on that, do let us know in the comments. And without further ado, we'll move ahead. Then we use then we call the init.db function that we created above to set up the database, right? So that the database sets up when we run the code. Now we're defining the Flask root, the first root, which basically collects data from the user and stores it within our database. So we define it like app.root. This is the standard procedure how we define a root. And the method that we only allow is post. What it means is nobody can access this method without doing the specific way to post the, without using the specific way through which he can, do a post request on this root. We can't access through a browser. We can't, do any other method, actions on it that we generally do with most websites in a browser, because we have limited the methods to just post. And this basically, a route like this basically could be referred to as a server, or could be referred to as an API, to do certain actions that doesn't require a lot of user interface user interface aspects to it. So the first thing we do to store data is immediately we parse data from the post request and identify A, B, C, D, E from the post request object we'll get, where we'll define A, B, C, D, E, and we store them in respective variables A, B, C, D, E. Now we connect with our database using the connect function, connect._db function that we defined above, and then we do a db.execute, and again we're using command words here. Insert into data is the specific table that we created, A, B, C, D, E. Values, again a command word which tells us what values to implement here, and we add the wildcard question mark here, and then we define those values outside the speech code after comma A, B, C, D, E. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into this. If you want us to, create a very, a basic introduction to how SQL command words and SQL commands work, let us know in the comments. After that, we return a JSONify. We return an object which is a JSON object, and we used to convert our object into a proper JSON object using the JSONify library. And the reason we're returning this data here is that this post request does not allow us to get for example, we're the developers, right? So we can, if you look at our terminal here, we are seeing these actions on the terminal: get, post, and we're getting the status code 200 here telling us the request went fine, the post request went fine, and the get request went fine. But if you're not a developer, you can't look at the code under the hood or this terminal, right? If you're not a developer of this project and you're leveraging this API or server, in that case, you'd have no idea if the request went through, if there was an error, or it worked as it should. So when we're returning a JSON object with message data stored successfully, we're telling the developer the API endpoint worked as expected. So there should be no issue with your, whatever, with this particular request that you're giving to this API. The second route that we defined here is the sum route, basically. So first route, we collected data from the request, saved it to the database. The second request that the second route that we defined is basically we need to get data from that we stored in the database and sum that data and then return that sum to the user that requested that sum, basically. So this route is defined with the method get, because we're just providing one data to one aspect of data to the user. So if you run the sum route, basically it would pull everything out, and as we haven't defined HTML, it would just show on the browser JSON object that would be returned to the user. So it doesn't, it's not that browser friendly because it was never intended to be used on the browser. More so the case is we return the data, the sum, to the user, and he uses it in whatever case he might need to use that for. So in this case, first, as usual, we connect with a database, and then we store our db.execute value in the row variable. And if you look at this db.execute, SQL command that we set, we select star means we select everything in a table. Data ordered by row ID. Row ID means we order it by row ID in decreasing order, and we limit it to 1, right? So any data that we come in, we just want to pull it from one row, right? Nothing more than that. So if we don't, we do a control statement here, which says if there's no row, if there's no data that's within the row, then we return the error statement again to let the end user know there was an error working with what error in the request that he sent to the API. If there was no, if data was indeed found, we just do a simple summation of all the data within the rows and return the sum as a JSON object to the end user. Now, that's all there is to just setting up a simple Flask application that does, gets data from the user, saves it to a database, and then after request from the user, pulls that data from the database, does an action on that data, which in this case was summation, and then returns that data to the user. You can do any action. It depends totally on you. We're just using sum here as an example of how you could potentially do an action on a database, on a Flask server or an API. So now we're just going to run a couple of basic commands here to see if it works. You can use Postman as well, but we're just going to use curl commands here. So the first curl command is defining content type, which is an application JSON. We're sending an object which defines ABCDE, and we're connecting with localhost 5000 and the root being store, basically, which this is where our application is running right now on this machine. So we click enter, we get the message data source successfully, which means it worked as it should. Now we use the second curl command, which is we need to do the sum, because there's no request here, no data name. We just run that route and we get the JSON object with the sum back. So we click enter, we get sum 15, which is exactly what the sum needed to be. And we pretty much defined how we can set up a simple fast server on an API that's